July 26, 1944, Haybec-Rivon, France, just before dawn. The air is damp and sweet with crushed nettles. A low mist hangs in the bocage, pooling in the sunken lanes like breath held too long. Unteroffizier Karl Bremer kneels behind a bramble-choked hedgerow, his gloved fingers testing the cool steel of an MG-42's barrel shroud. To his left, a boy-faced Gefreiter steadies a Karabiner 98K and whispers that the Americans have stopped firing for a moment. Es ist zu ruhig, Herr Unteroffizier. Too quiet. Bremer raises his field glasses. Through a chink of leaves, he sees the silhouette of an orchard and, beyond it, the blue-gray hint of another hedge. The sky is colorless. A thrush calls once and falls silent. Somewhere, metal clinks against metal. Distant, measured, like a blacksmith counting his blows. On the far side of that orchard, First Lieutenant Daniel Clark presses a map against a mossed gatepost with his forearm and squints at a damp grid square. The letters and numbers Q426173 sit like a promise. He thumbs the handset of his SCR 300 radio. Wilkin Red, this is Albany 2-4. Stand by for fire mission. Time sensitive. Over. Behind him, two enlisted men of the rifle company try to dry their wool sleeves and whisper about coffee. Clark glances at his wristwatch. He has synchronized it twice this morning, once with the rifle company commander and again with the voice that lived only in the radio, the fire direction center. Albany 2-4, Wilkin Red, send it. Clark breathes out. Grid Q426173. Hedge intersection with road cut. Target is confirmed MG. Enfilade on lane. Troops in the open believed behind primary hedge. Depth unknown. Danger close possible within 300. Request battalion. Time on target. Over. 10 miles to the rear, in a tent that smells of canvas, coffee, and pencil shavings, the FDC man of a US 105mm battalion pins Clark's coordinates to an M18 plotting board. His grease pencil hisses. Q426173, check. Another voice recites meteorology. Wind from 240, 8 knots at 200 meters. Temperature 15 Celsius. Density altitude 004. No rain. In the corner, a sergeant flips open a binder of firing tables, licking a finger to turn paper. The battalion fire direction officer, square-shouldered, eyes rimmed red, draws a line from battery positions to the target and calculates range and deflection. Battery center 8, 300 yards, charge 5. Time of flight, 28 seconds. He lifts his head. We're going TOT. Across a separate table, the Corps Artillery Liaison has already phoned the 155mm Long Tom Battalion. Their time of flight for the same grid is longer, 38, maybe 40 seconds depending on charge. The doctrine is clean and ruthless. You don't walk rounds in with ranging shots. You let the enemy believe you're still measuring, still fumbling, still asleep. You make them comfortable. Then you drop everything at once. Wilkin Red to Albany 2-4, the radio crackles. Clark cups the handset. Go. Time on target 0614 and 30 seconds. Say again, H-2 minutes from now. Whole battalion plus 1 Long Tom battery. 2 volleys, PD fuses, splash on my mark. Over. Clark watches his second hand skate past the hash marks. Albany copies, I have eyes on. Out. Bremer lowers his binoculars and lights a cigarette cupped in his palm. The boy-faced Gefreiter grins. Herr Unteroffizier, perhaps they are out of shells. Bremer exhales through his nose, smoke hanging low. He knows the pattern of American artillery. Usually you hear it first. The lonely, testing shots, the lazy stretch of ranging, then the creeping thunder. The hedges here in the Cotentin are thick as castle walls. A shell that lands short is just noise on the next farm. You adjust, you tuck tighter into the roots, you wait out the storm. He glances at his watch. He is not wound it in 2 days. Time has become guesswork. A mile behind Clark, 4 squat silhouettes crouch in a hedged field. M2A1 105mm howitzers. Trails dug in, muzzles elevated, crews shirt-sleeved and quiet. The battery commander checks his wristwatch against an artilleryman's voice on the field telephone. H-30. Breech blocks clank open. Powder charges, thick cloth bags, thump into waiting hands. The gunner reads off the quadrant elevation and deflection chalked on the tube's cradle. A private twists fuses on PD, point detonating, 1 per shell, thumb counting the clicks. This isn't the Pacific. There are no proximity fuses here in Normandy yet. When these shells hit, they will shatter hedges and throw dirt like surf. Over at the 155s, the long toms, the scene is the same, only larger, heavier, with muzzles like organ pipes. Their FDC has already calculated a 40-second time of flight. They will fire early so that their heavier, slower shells arrive at the same instant as the 105s. Watches. Everything depends on watches. Albany 2-4, this is Wilkin Red. Splash in 5. Clark feels the word in his teeth. He lifts his eyes over the gatepost and looks into the green wall that has killed so many men since June. Nettles, hawthorn, ancient earth bank, roots like fingers. The lane bends right. Beyond the bend is where the German gun chews, spitting tracers that comb the ruts when anyone dares move. The rifle company has learned to talk about that bend as if it were a personality, as if the lane could hate you. Clark raises his hand a few inches without thinking, as if to hush the hedge itself. Copy splash. Bremer hears nothing. For a heartbeat, he believes the American guns have forgotten him. The boy-faced Gefreiter has started to hum. The MG-42 lies still, hungry. Then, it happens the way a door slams on your fingers before you know the door exists. No warning shot, no ranging, just a splitting of dawn. The first long tom round detaches the top of the hedge 20 meters to Bremer's right and throws it into the lane like a cartload of hay. The second shells the field behind him, plowing a furrow so clean that potato plants hang in the air for the length of a breath before they remember gravity. Then the 105s arrive, not a ripple, but a sheet, a thunderhead that has decided to live inside the earth. Dirt and stone and hedge roots erupt in a single sentence. The boy-faced Gefreiter opens his mouth to shout, and there is only soil. The MG-42's receiver cover slams shut as if in prayer. Clark flinches purely because the world shifts. The orchard ahead of him flexes, leaves shiver, and a trunk shears off at waist height. He does not hear distinct explosions so much as feel a pressure pop that beats at his chest. He keeps the handset to his face and stares at the second hand climbing. Wilkin Red, Albany, on target, add 50, repeat. Then smoke, 2 guns, hedge corner, over. The reply is almost conversational. Albany, Wilkin Red, add 50, repeat. Smoke after, 2 guns, splash in 5. The men around Clark begin to move without being told. They've learned that American artillery will give them 15, maybe 30 seconds of a world rewritten. You move when the enemy forgets what shape the air is. Bremer's cheek is cut where a thorned branch kissed it like wire. He tries to think the way his training demands, count seconds, find the pattern, tuck behind the bank. But there is no pattern. A spray of stones hits the trunk beside him like buckshot. A heavy shell bursts farther back, and the concussion makes his knee forget it was in a kneeling position. He sprawls. The MG-42's tripod has sunk into the bank, its legs swallowed. Bremer turns toward the Gefreiter. The boy is on hands and knees, reaching for a helmet that isn't on his head. The next 105 steals the hedge above them cleanly, as if pruning shears the size of a church had passed once. Add 50, a gunner shouts somewhere behind Clark. Breach, bag, shell, ram. The howitzer coughs again, a punch in the shoulder of the hedged field. Already the 155s have completed their second volley, slow thunder rolling from the rear positions. The two systems, Division 105s and Corps 155s, speak to each other in time rather than voice. Their sentences land together not because men are shouting across fields, but because those men have agreed to the second when the sky will end. The lane is blind white with smoke now. Clark drags a single smoke grenade from his webbing, pulls the pin, rolls it into the lane, and watches the gray plume reach for the hedge like a ghost with long arms. Albany to Wilkin Red, smoke good, lifting, rifle company moving. He looks at the map one more time, at the quiet numbers, and then at the hedge, which is no longer a hedge but a line of stumps and earth and gaps like teeth knocked out. Bremer's ears ring. He smells loam, old manure, burnt cordite. He tries to shout orders, but his voice tastes wrong. He touches his ear, and his finger comes away red. A man down the lane, one of the Panzer Grenadiers from the next hedgerow, stands into the smoke in confusion and is dragged back by two figures he can't see. Somewhere, a runner is stumbling, his steel canteen thumping his thigh. Bremer manages, finally, to make his voice carry. Nachladen, check ammunition, sector right! But the sector is smoke and holes and a lane that has been folded inward like a pocket. Clark's world narrows to a rectangle of broken green. He knows, everyone in these lanes knows, that hedges are like chessboards. You can't remove one piece cleanly. You must bludgeon a shape into the board. Time on target is not a walk. It is a trap sprung. He has watched Germans wait out ranging and then sprint between shells. But today, there was nothing to wait. He presses the handset. Wilken Red, Albany. Shift to interdiction on road cut beyond. Same grid, add 100. Repeat. Over. The voice returns, calm as rain. Albany, Wilken Red. Add 100. Repeat. Splash in 5. Bremer finds the MG-42's feed tray and slaps the belt back in. His assistant gunner is coughing dirt. Together, they haul the tripod an arm's length to the left. It is like trying to row a boat in glue. The hedge that had hidden them has been lowered a full meter. The Americans will soon see across the lane they feared. He sets the sights blind, points the barrel where he thinks a man would be if he were him, and presses the butter-smooth two-stage trigger. The gun answers with its tearing sound, a sewing machine possessed, stitching through smoke in blind defiance. Clark drops into the lane with the first squad and tastes grit. The smoke is thick, but moving east, away from them. They have seconds. He raises his voice without knowing he will. Go! The men surge. Boot heels grind white chalk dust. A shape appears in the thinning smoke, a muzzle flash, low. The lane's right bank erupts with MG tracers. Clark has already keyed the handset. Wilken Red, Albany, immediate suppression, hedge corner. The handset crackles back even as his words still hang in the gray air. Albany, Wilken Red, splash in 5. July 26, 1944. Hébé-Crevant, France, just before dawn. The air is damp and sweet with crushed nettles. A low mist hangs in the bocage, pooling in the sunken lanes like breath held too long. Unteroffizier Karl Bremer kneels behind a bramble-choked hedgerow, his gloved fingers testing the cool steel of an MG-42's barrel shroud. To his left, a boy-faced Gefreiter steadies a Karabiner 98K and whispers that the Americans have stopped firing for a moment. Es ist zu ruhig, Herr Unteroffizier. Too quiet. Bremer raises his field glasses. Through a chink of leaves, he sees the silhouette of an orchard and, beyond it, the blue-gray hint of another hedge. The sky is colorless. A thrush calls once and falls silent. Somewhere, metal clinks against metal. Distant, measured, like a blacksmith counting his blows. On the far side of that orchard, First Lieutenant Daniel Clark presses a map against a mossed gatepost with his forearm and squints at a damp grid square. The letters and numbers, Q426173, sit like a promise. He thumbs the handset of his SCR 300 radio. Wilken Red, this is Albany 2-4. Stand by for fire mission. Time sensitive. Over. Behind him, two enlisted men of the rifle company try to dry their wool sleeves and whisper about coffee. Clark glances at his wristwatch. He has synchronized it twice this morning. Once with the rifle company commander, and again with a voice that lived only in the radio, the Fire Direction Center. Albany 2-4, Wilken Red, send it. Clark breathes out. Grid Q426173, hedge intersection with road cut. Target is confirmed MG, enfilade on lane. Troops in the open believed behind primary hedge, depth unknown. Danger close possible within 300. Request battalion, time on target, over. 10 miles to the rear, in a tent that smells of canvas, coffee, and pencil shavings, the FDC man of a US 105mm battalion pins Clark's coordinates to an M18 plotting board. His grease pencil hisses. Q426173, check. Another voice recites meteorology. Wind from 240, 8 knots at 200 meters. Temperature 15 Celsius. Density altitude 004. No rain. In the corner, a sergeant flips open a binder of firing tables, licking a finger to turn paper. The battalion fire direction officer, square-shouldered, eyes rimmed red, draws a line from battery positions to the target and calculates range and deflection. Battery center, 8,300 yards, charge 5. Time of flight, 28 seconds. He lifts his head. We're going TOT. Across a separate table, the Corps Artillery Liaison has already phoned the 155mm Long Tom Battalion. Their time of flight for the same grid is longer, 38, maybe 40 seconds depending on charge. The doctrine is clean and ruthless. You don't walk rounds in with ranging shots. You let the enemy believe you're still measuring, still fumbling, still asleep. You make them comfortable. Then you drop everything at once. Wilkin Red to Albany 2-4, the radio crackles. Clark cups the handset. Go. Time on target 0614 and 30 seconds. Say again, H minus 2 minutes from now. Whole battalion plus 1 Long Tom battery. 2 volleys. PD fuses. Splash on my mark. Over. Clark watches his second hand skate past the hash marks. Albany copies. I have eyes on. Out. Bremer lowers his binoculars and lights a cigarette cupped in his palm. The boy-faced Gefreiter grins. Herr Unteroffizier, perhaps they are out of shells. Bremer exhales through his nose, smoke hanging low. He knows the pattern of American artillery. Usually you hear it first. The lonely testing shots, the lazy stretch of ranging, then the creeping thunder. The hedges here in the Cotentin are thick as castle walls. A shell that lands short is just noise on the next farm. You adjust. You tuck tighter into the roots. You wait out the storm. He glances at his watch. He has not wound it in 2 days. Time has become guesswork. A mile behind Clark, 4 squat silhouettes crouch in a hedged field. M2A1 105mm howitzers, trails dug in, muzzles elevated, crews shirt-sleeved and quiet. The battery commander checks his wristwatch against an artilleryman's voice on the field telephone. H-30. Breech blocks clank open. Powder charges, thick cloth bags, thump into waiting hands. The gunner reads off the quadrant elevation and deflection chalked on the tube's cradle. A private twists fuses on PD, point detonating. 1 per shell, thumb counting the clicks. This isn't the Pacific. There are no proximity fuses here in Normandy yet. When these shells hit, they will shatter hedges and throw dirt like surf. Over at the 155s, the Long Toms, the scene is the same, only larger, heavier, with muzzles like organ pipes. Their FDC has already calculated a 40-second time of flight. They will fire early so that their heavier, slower shells arrive at the same instant as the 105s. Watches. Everything depends on watches. Albany 2-4, this is Wilkin Red. Splash in 5. Clark feels the word in his teeth. He lifts his eyes over the gatepost and looks into the green wall that has killed so many men since June. Nettles, hawthorn, ancient earth bank, roots like fingers. The lane bends right. Beyond the bend is where the German gun chews, spitting tracers that comb the ruts when anyone dares move. The rifle companies learned to talk about that bend as if it were a personality, as if the lane could hate you. Clark raises his hand a few inches without thinking, as if to hush the hedge itself. Copy splash. Bremer hears nothing. For a heartbeat, he believes the American guns have forgotten him. The boy-faced Gefreiter has started to hum. The MG-42 lies still, hungry. Then, it happens the way a door slams on your fingers before you know the door exists. No warning shot, no ranging, just a splitting of dawn. The first Long Tom round detaches the top of the hedge 20 meters to Bremer's right and throws it into the lane like a cartload of hay. The second shells the field behind him, plowing a furrow so clean that potato plants hang in the air for the length of a breath before they remember gravity. Then the 105s arrive, not a ripple, but a sheet, a thunderhead that has decided to live inside the earth. Dirt and stone and hedge roots erupt in a single sentence. The boy-faced Gefreiter opens his mouth to shout, and there is only soil. The MG-42's receiver cover slams shut as if in prayer. Clark flinches purely because the world shifts. The orchard ahead of him flexes, leaves shiver, and a trunk shears off at waist height. He does not hear distinct explosions so much as feel a pressure pop that beats at his chest. He keeps the handset to his face and stares at the second hand climbing. Wilkin Red, Albany, on target, add 50, repeat. Then smoke, 2 guns, hedge corner, over. The reply is almost conversational. Albany, Wilkin Red, add 50, repeat. Smoke after, 2 guns, splash in 5. The men around Clark begin to move without being told. They've learned that American artillery will give them 15, maybe 30 seconds of a world rewritten. You move when the enemy forgets what shape the air is. Bremer's cheek is cut where a thorned branch kissed it like wire. He tries to think the way his training demands. Count seconds, find the pattern, tuck behind the bank. But there is no pattern. A spray of stones hits the trunk beside him like buckshot. A heavy shell bursts farther back, and the concussion makes his knee forget it was in a kneeling position. He sprawls. The MG-42's tripod has sunk into the bank, its legs swallowed. Bremer turns toward the Gefreiter. The boy is on hands and knees, reaching for a helmet that isn't on his head. The next 105 steals the hedge above them cleanly, as if pruning shears the size of a church had passed once. Add 50, a gunner shouts somewhere behind Clark. Breach, bag, shell, ram. The howitzer coughs again, a punch in the shoulder of the hedged field. Already the 155s have completed their second volley, slow thunder rolling from the rear positions. The two systems, Division 105s and Corps 155s, speak to each other in time rather than voice. Their sentences land together not because men are shouting across fields, but because those men have agreed to the second when the sky will end. The lane is blind white with smoke now. Clark drags a single smoke grenade from his webbing, pulls the pin, rolls it into the lane, and watches the gray plume reach for the hedge like a ghost with long arms. Albany to Wilkin Red, smoke good, lifting, rifle company moving. He looks at the map one more time, at the quiet numbers, and then at the hedge, which is no longer a hedge, but a line of stumps and earth and gaps like teeth knocked out. Bremer's ears ring. He smells loam, old manure, burnt cordite. He tries to shout orders, but his voice tastes wrong. He touches his ear and his finger comes away red. A man down the lane, one of the Panzer Grenadiers from the next hedgerow, stands into the smoke and confusion and is dragged back by two figures he can't see. Somewhere a runner is stumbling, his steel canteen thumping his thigh. Bremer manages, finally, to make his voice carry. Knockladen, check ammunition, sector right. But the sector is smoke and holes and a lane that has been folded inward like a pocket. Clark's world narrows to a rectangle of broken green. He knows, everyone in these lanes knows, that hedges are like chessboards. You can't remove one piece cleanly. You must bludgeon a shape into the board. Time on target is not a walk. It is a trap sprung. He has watched Germans wait out ranging and then sprint between shells. But today there was nothing to wait. He presses the handset. Wilkin Red, Albany. Shift to interdiction on road cut beyond. Same grid, add 100. Repeat, over. The voice returns, calm as rain. Albany, Wilkin Red, add 100. Repeat, splash in 5. Bremer finds the MG-42's feed tray and slaps the belt back in. His assistant gunner is coughing dirt. Together they haul the tripod an arm's length to the left. It is like trying to row a boat in glue. The hedge that had hidden them has been lowered a full meter. The Americans will soon see across the lane they feared. He sets the sights blind, points the barrel where he thinks a man would be if he were him, and presses the butter-smooth two-stage trigger. The gun answers with its tearing sound, a sewing machine possessed, stitching through smoke in blind defiance. Clark drops into the lane with the first squad and tastes grit. The smoke is thick but moving east, away from them. They have seconds. He raises his voice without knowing he will. Go! The men surge. Boot heels grind white chalk dust. A shape appears in the thinning smoke. A muzzle flash, low. The lane's right bank erupts with MG tracers. Clark has already keyed the handset. Wilkin Red, Albany. Immediate suppression, hedge corner. The handset crackles back, even as his words still hang in the gray air. Albany, Wilkin Red, splash in 5. Anytime you've got the time, the carrier tone fades, and for a heartbeat, the lane remembers how to be a lane. Then the world inhales again. Clark uses the quiet like a tool. Second platoon, bound past the stump line. First, cover, Rhino holds. He feels the radio handset tug at its cord as he moves. It's become a second organ, beating in time with the watches stacked up behind him from battalion to division to corps. Beyond the shattered hedge, low fields undulate toward Marigny, pastures stitched by ditches and pollarded willows. The sky is a pale sheet, starting to show sun through its seams. He checks his watch. The face is filmed with grit. The second hand keeps going anyway. Unteroffizier Bremer has the opposite sensation. The universe keeps stopping. He pulls his 7 men into a crooked line behind the second hedge and tries to place his mind in a map he does not own. The lieutenant they answered to is now a rumor. The company's neck crackles like bacon and says nothing. He tastes chalk, old manure, the copper of blood from his bitten tongue. A grenadier presses a single stick grenade into his palm, a polite gift that admits poverty. Bremer curls his fingers around the wooden handle like a priest around a candle that will not light in the wind. Panzerjäger? Someone asks. Anti-tank. Bremer shakes his head. There's no shot with the field so cut by smoke and churn. He knows somewhere in the regiment's rear a battery officer is swearing into a phone about why his 10.5s cannot lay a proper box barrage without sighting rounds. He can hear, in memory, their own pre-war gunners' voices. You test, you measure, you creep. You give the enemy the courtesy of a warning. Courtesy is dead in these hedges. Clark's sapper team ghosts past, the sergeant carrying a short-handled shovel like a baton. Wire on the right, not worth cutting, take the gap, he says as if ordering breakfast. A rifleman steps over a mangled tangle of hawthorn, the hedge's old heart torn out by the rhino, and murmurs, watch the dip. To nobody, to everybody. An M1 barks twice on first platoon's line. A helmet drops from the lip of a ditch like a coin sliding off a table. Albany to Wilkin Red, Clark says, breathing hard but steady. Shift suppressed to Q427177, road bend with ditch, likely fallback route. PD, then HE on hedgerow line left of bend, 2 volleys only. Wilkin Red copies, comes the answer mild as ever. Blue splash in 5. 10 miles back, the FDC tent is brighter now, sun pinning trapezoids through canvas onto plotting boards. A corporal notes non-standard conditions. Warming air, decreasing air density, a tick off the elevation to keep the rounds honest. A captain aligns pencil and watch. Battery A, time of flight 28 seconds, he says, eyes on the second hand. Battery B, 27. Battery C, 26. Long toms, 38. Fire to meet at 0641 and 15 seconds. Set splash, -5. The word minus rides on coffee breath and certainty. Bremer hears the first stitch of 30-06s again, measured, almost leisurely. Americans shoot like they're reading a manual between rounds. He cups his hands and bellows toward the right flank. Feuerdisziplin, kurze Stoße! Fire discipline, short bursts. The MG-42 coughs a clean 2-second tear, then another. It's not much, but it is a shape in the chaos, and shapes keep men standing. He tries to find a target. Smoke folds and unfolds like bedsheets being snapped. Shot, over. Shot, out. Splash, over. Splash, out. The junction at the bend buckles again. Single thunderclap, no rehearsal.
Watches.
A truck that had edged forward in hope recoils into its own dust and becomes a sideways sketch. Men who had picked that moment to move become suggestions in the air, and then learning experiences for anyone watching. Bremer forces his breath to be regular. He has not been taught to fight against arrangements of seconds. You can hear awe in a battlefield, even when it sounds like calm order. A private 2 men down from Clark murmurs, "Sir, how'd they all hit at once?" And Clark, on one knee in the churned lane, chooses to answer as if they were in a classroom instead of a hedgerow. "Watches," he says. "We set the time the shells must be on the target, time on target. Each battery fires early or late to make that time, depending on how long their shells will fly. You don't hear range, add, drop. You just hear the end of the problem." He doesn't say, "You hear it if you live through it." Ahead, the land opens. A rarity in Normandy, like a generosity. There's a shallow valley with fields divided by stakes, not banked hedges. Someone's already cut firewood there. It's the kind of place maps call good going. Clark tastes hope like a superstition, pushes it down, lifts the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red, firing good, will push the saddle, Keep interdiction on the left-hand track and any crossroads beyond grid Q428178. Over. Roger, Albany, the radio purrs. Corps will add 3 guns with variable time for airburst if needed beyond. You'll hear it in 5. Copy. Bremer glances back and sees no captain, no signaler, no red pennant for a company CP. Only a line of heads dropping and rising like seals in a gray sea. He imagines the battalion net at that moment. Too many voices, too much need. He reaches into his tunic pocket and produces a triangle of paper saved from weeks ago. A ration chit with a neat stamp. He stares at it and cannot remember why he kept it. He grips it, then tucks it back. He tells himself a story. There is a line they can hold 2 hedges back, with a farm courtyard and stone walls and some mutually supporting fields of fire. He will get the boys there. He says it in his head, The rhino lurches, hangs, drops, shoulders forward again. Behind it, a rifle squad breaks left, another right. The platoon leader points his carbine like a conductor's baton, and men move to the music. The tank commander on the rhino's deck, goggles dusty, scarf black with exhaust, points with 2 fingers, and the driver slews the nose to face a gap in poplars. The Cullen device bites, shoulders, rends, roots snap, and daylight is suddenly a thing men can use. Machine gun fire reaches out in brief, angry combs from ahead left. Clark drops into a new ditch and the world whines past his ear. He presses the handset, thinks in grids, says, Albany to Wilkin Red, immediate suppression, hedge line Q428176 left of road, danger close. The reply is the same litany in the same human voice. Shot, over, shot, out. Splash, over, splash, out. It feels almost blasphemous to have a lullaby for this. The hedge line grows white flowers, shell bursts snipping air. A cartridge box spins like a toy. 3 figures detach from the shade and sprint. One folds as if a string were cut and another hauls him by the belt, practical and cruelly tender. Clark raises his M1 and doesn't shoot again. The shells do the verbs for him. Bremer recognizes the railroad clock quality in the American fire at last. It's not simply weight, it's simultaneity. He was taught in orchestra you could hear a cymbal, warming clarinets, testing horns before the piece began. This is the first bar at full volume, and then the third, and the fifth, without the second ever admitting it existed. He tells the boy-faced Gefreiter to pass the word to the right. Fall back by files, one covering the other. The boy nods, muscles his mouth into yes, runs a half step, and the ground picks him up and sets him down again without a middle. Bremer reaches him, and the boy's eyes are 2 blue things, looking at a thought he didn't finish. The handle of the grenade in Bremer's fist presses into his palm like a useless prayer bead. He leaves it and drags the boy's weight into the fold of ground, because you do, because the older man did it for you once. On the U.S. gun line, a number 1 man on a 105 smacks the breech closed and shouts, "On the way!" The 2 bucks. The chief of section glances at his watch without thinking about why he trusts it more than his own heart. Set the next volley to lift on Blue 6's mark, he calls, and the gunner nods, already dialing deflection as if adjusting a radio. Behind the battery commander, a signal corporal rides the field telephone wire with light hands. Battalion net to battery to gun, second hands braided with copper like rope. Clark keys the handset and speaks low so his voice won't share his breathlessness with men who need it for themselves. Albany to Wilkin Red, lift on my mark. Mark. He waves his hand and the platoon leader pops up, points, goes. The rifle's tempo changes, measured to urgent to hot. Somewhere to the right, a BAR starts its comfortable chew. A sergeant's voice calls out ranges without being asked, and you find yourself believing him because it is easier than not. Bremer finally gets the MG42 laid low and drags the belt straight and wraps his cheek against the stock as if it could anchor him in the day. He picks a shape, helmet and shoulders in the smoke, and presses the trigger. The gun writes a bright ribbon across the gap. The shape flinches and disappears. He holds the second burst 2 beats, teaching his hands where discipline lives now. He looks left and right and sees mouths moving, thinks, we are still a line, even if it is drawn in chalk. A new sound enters the air, not heavier than the 155s exactly, but higher, a fizz before the blow. Variable time fuses open little white umbrellas over the far track, a lacework of airbursts that machine men down without touching the ground. Core guns, Clark says, to no one in particular, bless 'em. To the radio, Albany to Wilkin Red, effects excellent. Continue airburst on the far track, we're moving. Roger Albany, rounds complete, good hunting. They run. It feels like sin to stand and run in these fields, where every hedge was a trap an hour ago. Boots slap, gear thumps, you can hear breath. The rhino clanks and whines and grinds, and then, shockingly, the land flattens into a field bounded by wire and posts and a single, sullen apple tree. Beyond that, the roads begin to intersect in honest right angles instead of nightmares. Bremer watches 2 of his men crest the next bank and flatten, alive by coin flip. He thinks of the road to Coutances, of a staff map with a blue grease pencil line pushing toward Avranches, of a phrase he'd heard in training, Bewegliche Verteidigung, mobile defense. It had sounded elegant then, a chess term. Now it looks like running in mud while the air edits your choices. He puts the grenade away. It is a small, childish surrender to the fact that this will not be decided at arm's length. A new runner, barely shaving, eyes white as coins, slides into Bremer's shallow scrape. Herr Unteroffizier, battalion says hold second hedge until dark, counterattack at dusk. Bremer looks at the gray sky, at the sun noodling through cloud like a caution, at the watches he does not own. He nods, and the nod means nothing in this language of seconds. Clark drops to a knee in the shadow of the apple tree, the handset warm against his jaw. He smells apple skin and smoke, and the iron tang that rides both days like this and days in the machine shop back in Ohio. He glances right. He can see briefly, beyond the hedges, the promise of country where tanks can breathe and riflemen don't have to file through a green keyhole to live. He doesn't smile. He checks his watch. Albany to Wilkin Red, shift to interdiction on the D7 road south of Marigny. We'll mark our forward line with a yellow panel in the saddle. Estimate push to Q430-179 in 15. Over. Albany, Wilkin Red. Copy interdiction D7. First Army notes exploitation routes opening. We're with you. Shot in 5. Bremer sets his cheek to the stock once more and finally understands the sentence he's been reading all morning. The Americans aren't fast. Not exactly. They are punctual. They make the weather with their seconds and then walk inside it. Albany to Wilkin Red. Shift to interdiction on the D7 south of Marigny. The reply is a thread pulled taut through canvas and wire. Wilkin Red copies. Time on target at 06:57. Long Tom's lead. Batteries A, B, C follow. Shot in 5. Clark's thumb stills on the handset. He glances at the watch face lacquered with hedge dust. Seconds circle like patient vultures. 10 miles behind, the FDC tent grows noon bright. Grease pencils trip against acetate. A captain adjusts for warming air, elevation down 2, charge 5, and jots a tiny T beside the new line. Mechanical time fuse for airburst, not proximity. We're not in the Pacific and we're not giving VT away in Normandy, he murmurs to his chart man, a reminder as much as an order. The corporal spins the fuse setter, teeth clicking, hands steady as if he were frosting a cake. Set 3.2, the chief of section calls. Treetop burst. Breach slams. The battery commander's voice is a metronome. Fire long toms -11. 105s -2. All bring it to 57 and 15. Set splash -5. Unteroffizier Bremer's section crouches in the peeled-back second hedge. 7 men dark with soil and smoke. The boy with the blue eyes breathes like a man just taught how again. Grit has stippled his chin to stubble. Bremer keeps the MG-42 near his cheekbone, the stock a cool reassurance. He tries to make the field behave like the diagrams he learned under the chestnut in garrison, interlocking arcs, grazing fire, dead space mapped like furniture. But the furniture moves each time the Americans tell their clocks what to do. Clark feels the lane widen as hedges sag, and the Rhino opens one more myth. A BAR chews on his right, steady as a saw. He raises 2 fingers. The rifle platoon leader peels a squad left toward a low saddle tufted with thistles. Past that saddle, the land stops pretending to be walls and becomes fields again, the kind you could run across and only worry about bullets, not the architecture of plants. Albany to Wilkin Red, Clark says, breath fogging the handset. Interdiction at the crossroads 1 grid beyond the D7 bend. Expect wheeled traffic. HE, then time fuse air to scatter. Roger, Albany. Rounds away. Splash in 5. Shot. Over. Shot. Out. Splash. Over. S. There isn't room for the last syllable. The first 155 finds the far verge of the road like a blind man's cane tapping a skull. Then the air over the junction flinches with blooming puffs as mechanical time fuses clip steel into sleet. A Kubel wagon skids and is simply not there. A pair of cyclists topple, one still clutching handlebars. A gray Opel truck tries to jink into a farm gate and meets a 105 that arrives exactly as the wheel wants to turn. The crossroads, for 30 seconds, is less a place than a decision rewritten by strangers' watches. Interdiction effective, Clark murmurs, though nobody asked. Albany, Wilkin Red, rounds complete, Corps acknowledges. The voice on the wire sounds like someone reading train times. Clark almost laughs. It is a station schedule sung in high explosive. Bremer watches the airbursts scissor the road beyond, each poplar coughing leaves to cover the dead as if embarrassed by the math. He feels the message more than understands it. The Americans are not merely flattening the hedge in front of him. They are killing the space his retreat must pass through, on a time he does not own. Nach rechts, Staffen! Immer ein Mann deckt! Stagger right. Always one man covers. He breaks their movement into notes. 2 crawling, 2 covering, 2 preparing to rise when the next measure is quiet. He keeps count as if count were a talisman. When the next clap comes, 105's now, sharp and busy, he feels the earth jump first, then hears it, the way pain often outruns understanding. Blue 1, take the saddle! Clark jerks his chin. The platoon leader flicks his carbine left and the squad unhooks, low and quick, toward the shallow fold of ground. The Rhino's Cullen teeth scrape a buried root with the sound of a cello string snapping. The driver eases and bites again, shoulders through, and a slab of hedge gives up and leans like a drunk whose arm you take. Clark risks a look, left, right, then stands and runs with the second squad, the handset knocking his chest like a second heart. He hits dirt at the saddle's lip and smells apples, wet nettle, and something burnt that could be cordite or breakfast. Wilkin Red to Albany. Counter battery reports German mortars northeast of your push. We can give you 1 battalion time on target into Q429180 if you can confirm. Albany copies. Confirm mortars. Pig yard with set field of fire. Give me TOT. 2 volleys. PD first, then time fuse air. Danger close. Albany, Wilkin Red. H-40 seconds. Splash in 5. Bremer, squinting through a scrim of smoke, spots his own mortarmen kneeling like penitent mechanics by a pigsty whose roof is canted rakishly. He wants to wave them up, shout them a warning, but the physical world chooses that moment to edit them out. The pigsty roof lifts whole, tilts, lies down elsewhere. The first volley is point detonating, mean and final. The second shreds the air above as if the sky had caught on barbed wire. When sound gives him back his hands, his palms are on the blue-eyed boy's shoulders, and he has no memory of moving them there. Clark watches the pig yard disappear in 2 brackets of punctuation and nods once, more at the principle than the result. Albany to Wilkin Red. Good effects. Lift and push interdiction 50 beyond, marking new forward line with yellow panel. Copy, Albany. Rounds complete. Time check. The voice reads the minutes. Clark and a battery commander and a corps captain and 3 gun chiefs glance at their seconds together, like parishioners kneeling on one carpet. By late morning, the hedges, those old earth banks with roots like hands, are no longer architecture. They are weathered furniture in a house with new windows kicked in. The rifle companies begin to talk in normal words again. Left, there, move, instead of the prayers hedgerow fighting demands. Somewhere east, a column of half-tracks that had once been Panzerlehr's pride limps through smoke as if it had walked off a photograph. Rumor says 7th Corps has punched a seam wide enough that a whole armored division could breathe through it. Rumor, for once, feels slow. Blue 6 to all blues, Clark says on the company net. Consolidate on the orchard north of the saddle. Set fields of fire. Expect counterthrust. Then to Wilkin Red. Albany. Shift fires to the Orchard Road junction beyond our limit. We'll throw yellow when we're set. Roger, Albany. We'll keep their answers late. Bremer's runner appears again, cheeks streaked with 2 clean lines where tears or sweat cut mud. Herr Unteroffizier, Battalion, hold the second hedge. Counterattack at dusk. Mechanized. Orders. And orders fall out of the boy's mouth like parts from a kit, complete in the box, useless without the tool that's missing. Bremer nods because nodding is still a currency men will accept. Tell them we hold, he says, and hears the pride in it like a lie told for a good reason. He crawls along his line, touching shoulders, redistributing rounds. He sees a Panzerschreck cradled like a baby by a grenadier whose face is an old man's today. Ziele auf die Ketten, Bremer says. Aim for the tracks. He knows the advice tastes like ash. Without cover that stands, you aim at a thought, and pray the thought stands still long enough to be shot. The counterattack announces itself first as tracks heard through ruts, foreign, a faster rhythm than German half-tracks make, and then as dust. Not panzers. U.S. tanks moving far to the flank, beyond his sector, not toward him, but past him. That is the new humiliation. The enemy does not approach your line, he passes it, as if it were a story he has finished reading. Bremer feels the braid on his shoulder like a weight, not an honor. He knows he must give his men something to do that smells like control. Feuer auf Zeichen, he says. Fire on signal. He holds the signal like a promise he can keep. Clark hears the clatter on his right, where the regiment over has also found room to run. He imagines a corps map in a tent, pencil strokes straightening from hedgerow squiggles into arrows. He breathes and says, Albany to Wilkin Red. Interdiction looks good. We'll push to grid Q430-179 in 1-5. Confirm you can keep the crossroads sown. Albany, Wilkin Red. Copy 1-5. We'll keep sowing. The voice is pleased, human, as if they were talking about a well-built barn. Time moves in matching chunks. On the gun line, men strip to undershirts and toss powder bag remnants into a neat, wet heap. A number 2 man taps each shell with the back of his hand as if to wish it luck. The battery commander rolls his shoulder and thinks of home by accident. The thought of his kitchen clock makes him check his wrist again. In the corps tent, the liaison to armor scratches 4ADCCA beside the arrow toward Coutances, and a general's aide nods and trots out to a jeep holding that question like a hot plate. Blue 6, set hasty defense in the orchard, Clark says, crawling through apples and hornets and the tart smell of a season rudely interrupted. He places a BAR to rake the lane, a rifleman to watch the right-hand gap, a sapper team to string 2 sections of wire near a stump, safe enough to call a stump. He raises the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Lift on my mark in 3, 2, mark. The artillery obliges, as if time had a handle and he had grasped it. Bremer sees American helmets settle into the orchard beyond and realizes they are no longer cautious there. The orchard is not a mouth waiting to bite them. It is a room they have furnished. He holds up his hand. His 7 men breathe with him. He counts in his head, not in seconds but in heartbeats, and mouths, Jetzt, now. And the MG-42 writes a bright belt into the orchard's edge. The Panzerschreck farts a bitter flame. The rocket swings slow and ugly and bites dirt, short of a Sherman that never knew it had been threatened. The orchard answers, rifles, a BAR, and then, above all of it, the snip and saw of airburst shrapnel as the FDC sends one last stitch across the road beyond. The counterattack that was promised to him does not arrive as tanks at dusk. It arrives as a rumor, stripped naked by the kind of artillery that drops conclusions instead of hints. Bremer does not think doomed, he thinks late. The worst sin on a field run by watches. Clark checks his watch, 07:52. He keys the handset one more time. Albany to Wilkin Red, we're set at the Orchard. Interdiction beyond holding. Thank you for the seconds. Albany, Wilkin Red, Roger, rounds complete. The voice adds, softer, give us your next time when you have it. Clark lowers the handset and looks at the men he can see. Them breathing, them blinking, them ordinary again for a heartbeat inside extraordinary noise. He thinks of Newark watchmakers who will never know their springs built a road through living walls. He thinks of clocks that do not lie, and hedges that finally did. By late afternoon, the light thins to pewter, the kind that turns sweat to a chill under webbing. The Orchard has the busy quiet of a train platform just before the whistle. Men shifting feet, checking straps, voices low, an impatience that belongs to machines more than people. Clark sets his helmet crown down on the grass, rubs grit from the crystal of his wristwatch with a thumb pad, and studies the second hand like a weather vane. He speaks into the SCR 300 as if the handset were an old friend. Albany to Wilkin Red. Request pre-planned defensive fires. Final protective line along hedge at grid Q 431179. 2 concentrations beyond the road bend and interdiction boxes on the D7 at 1-minute intervals. TOT each on my mark. A beat, then the same measured voice, a lifeline. Albany Wilkin Red. Copy FPF line. 2 DF concentrations, interdiction boxes. We can hold 6 schedules in rotation. Give time hacks and we'll knit the seconds. Unteroffizier Bremer lies flat behind a slit of earth that pretends to be a trench and does the arithmetic that keeps men sane. 7 with him, 2 lightly wounded, 3 gone. The boy with the blue eyes watches his hands. Kommt der Gegenangriff? Is the counterattack coming? Bremer does not look up. Ja. He makes the syllable move no air. Yes. He believes and does not believe it at once. He hears trucks beyond the hedges, gears gnashing because the drivers are tired enough to forget to be gentle. He hears a voice he decides is an officer's, clipped, even, too clean for this day. 45, he hears his own breath and the slow drag of the MG42's belt through mud. At the FDC, the tent is a lung drawing in and out on canvas ribs. Air warms, pencil wax softens. Men take off sleeves and keep the watch bands where they were, pale lines on brown wrists. The fire direction officer keeps one finger on a strip chart of the D7 like a conductor's baton and calls times as if addressing a church supper. Interdiction box able, H-0040 from the top of each minute. Box Baker, H-0025. Box Charlie, H-0010. Long Tom's fire to meet 0000. Standard PD, then alternate MT for tree burst. The corporal at the fuse setter sings back numbers. 3.2, 2.9, 3.5. The clicks like a clock teaching itself to speak. Time check coming, the radio says in Clark's ear, and the FDC voice threads through rain smell and apple smell as if it had been poured into the day from a spout. At the tone, 07:59. Tone. A soft beep, almost shy. Clark taps his watch glass with a knuckle and nods, nothing wasted. Albany copies, mark my FPF line at 0801. I'll call Mark. Then DF1 at 080230. DF2 at 0804. Interdiction Able, Baker, Charlie, continuous for 10 minutes. Over. Wilkin Red copies. We'll make the weather. The counterattack comes as a rumor you can hear first. Track clatter that doesn't match the footfall of half-tracks you've known all July. Bremer lifts his cheek from the dirt and sees silhouettes through the last of the Orchard haze. Boxy, turreted, maybe 2 Panzers, maybe 3. Shapes fattened by side skirts. He feels relief, like a wrong answer you love. There, finally, something you can name. Panzer vor, he barks, and the word both steadies and betrays him. The grenadier with the Panzerschreck hunches, steps into the shallow lane, sights along the pipe with a prayer. Bremer looks to his left to find the boy with the blue eyes. The boy staring through smoke at nothing, as if he expected his kitchen to step out of the air. Clark sees them too, but in slivers, silhouettes where hedges thin, a glint that could be Scherzen, a cloud where a driver goosenecks a clutch. He doesn't cue excitement in his voice. Albany to Wilkin Red, possible armor probing along the farm track north of the D7 bend. Will hold fire till my mark. He looks to the platoon leader in the orchard, who has his carbine up and his mouth compressed, the way men hold a tune when they're trying not to cry. FPF in position, the FDC tells the gun line. Men break the last laces on powder bags and tamp charges like bakers. A chief of section slaps the breech door with a palm, affection and violence both. Watch hands move, voices make a braid across battery nets. Shot, over, shot, out, splash, over, splash, out. Bremer gives the Panzerschreck man a tap that is more a blessing than an order. Varta, he says. Wait. He watches the shapes pace forward as if late to a meeting. He could fire the MG and win a second. Maybe. But the second is a precious coin and there is nothing to buy with it yet. His watch does not run. Time lives in other people's pockets. Mark, Clark says softly at 0801. The orchard's edge goes to ground as the 1st Battalion FPF lands along the hedge in a single stitched seam. No lazy walk-in, no add 20. The line is there, all at once, as if the field had decided it was a minefield after years of pretending not to be. PD fuses pop and crack. Fragments bite dirt at knee height. The height doctrine calls grazing. It is not a wall of fire. It is a sentence with no commas. The panzers halt as if the field had put a hand on their chests. DF1 at 080230, Clark whispers, and the first concentration beyond the hedge lands among the hedges past the hedge, a Russian doll of destruction. Duller thuds for 155s, busy snaps for 105s, leaves shaking down as confetti for a parade no one asked for. DF2 at 0804, he adds, and breathes in smoke that tastes like pencil lead and pennies. Bremer keeps count by teeth. He knows good barrages confess themselves in patterns. This one is a math problem solved out loud. FPF. Line. Pause to breathe. DF1. Farther. Pause. DF2. Farther still. Then something new. The road boxes. Down the D7 at neat intervals like mile markers invented by God. Air and earth punish space. A truck tries to be brave between Abel and Baker. Time itself slaps it on the nose, and it backs into a ditch in fright. The Panzerschreck farts its awful note. The rocket limps and, miraculously, gouges a Sherman's track at the edge of the orchard. The tank pitches with the slow sadness of a large animal that has been surprised. Its commander ducks, gestures a little circle with a finger that means, "Gun where I point, please," and a coax rips a hedge to ribs. Clark feels the impulse to cheer the armor and amputates it. You don't waste breath you'll need for the next sentence. Albany, Wilkin Red. Battery from Corps can add VT. Negative. Correction. Mechanical time. Over the 2nd DF if you judge infantry massing. Confirm? The discipline in the voice is notable. A lesser man would have celebrated the option he could not use. Albany copies. Use mechanical time. We don't show VT. We keep our secrets. Clark glances at a private whose face looks 14 and says, "Keep your head down, son." The private nods as if he has been given a watch he does not yet know how to set. "Mark," Clark says again, and DF2 moves 10 yards like a tide. On the gun line, men feel the rhythm in calves and wrists. A number 2 man wipes a shell with his sleeve, as if the steel would otherwise take offense. The battery commander looks at his watch and thinks of his kitchen clock because he cannot help it. And then he is back, neck deep, in seconds. Bremer risks a long burst from the MG42 and is rewarded with an American-shaped twisting and being helped by 2 others. The reward costs him. The FPF tightens like a belt. Dirt slaps his knuckles. He accepts the correction like a dog taught not to jump. He looks right. The boy with the blue eyes has found a grin somehow, his mouth black with grit. "Halten?" he asks. "Hold?" Bremer says, "Ja," and wants to mean it. For 90 seconds, the field is a metronome. Abel, Baker, Charlie, Abel, Baker, Charlie. Each a box where seconds meet shells. Each a space scrubbed clean before courage can get traction. The panzers edge, halt, edge again. One slews its hole toward a gate as if the gate could change the arithmetic. It cannot. A 155 arrives in the gate's precise woodwork, reorganizes it into a question mark, and leaves. Clark breathes. In, to, out, to. He hears, underneath the ordnance, the company net, a sergeant counting men, a medic asking for a runner, a BAR man reporting 2 mags left as if ordering bread. He keys the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Lift FPF in 5 on my mark. Mark. Keep DF2 for 30 more, then shift both DF concentrations 200 beyond the bend. Interdiction boxes continue for 5. Wilkin Red copies. Rounds complete. My Nasim's life. And then, abruptly, it is quieter. The way a ballroom is quieter when the song ends but the lights haven't gone up. Smoke thins. The damaged Sherman's crew drops smoke and the tank humps backwards into the orchard's shade like a whale seeking a deeper pool. Riflemen straighten spines that had learned to be reeds. The Rhino's driver kills the engine so he can hear his own pulse. Clark hears birds. He doesn't trust them. Bremer lifts his cheek. The Panzers back out of his world, coy, humiliated, still whole. The counterattack has occurred, on paper, in memory, and yet he holds the same hedge. He wants to call that victory and finds the word too large for his mouth. He raises his hand. Ein Mann nach hinten. Meldung an Leutnant, wir halten. 1 man back. Tell the lieutenant we hold. The runner nods and goes because moving backward in this weather is courage. On the gun line, men loop trails shut and sit down hard on ammunition boxes, their bodies discovering the weight of their bones again. Someone pours coffee that tastes like the morning in the trench had a child. The battery commander scratches a note on a message pad, Albany good at watches, and tears it off, embarrassed by his sentimentality, then tucks it in his pocket anyway. Clark checks his watch. 0809. He blinks at how small the numbers are, compared to how large the world had been a minute ago. He keys the handset with a forefinger nicked by hedge thorns and says, as much to finish the sentence as to ask for anything, Albany to Wilkin Red. Thanks for the seconds. Anytime you've got the time, the voice says, and Clark laughs once, the sound cracked and clean. He looks down the orchard aisle. The men are drinking from canteens, spitting grit, smiling because they're alive and because they've learned a trick that feels like an unfair advantage you spent months earning. You feel it too, watching, the sense that clocks, not muscles, lifted the hedge out of the way. Dusk files the edges off shapes, until hedges become cliffs again, and men speak softer without knowing why. In the orchard, someone opens a tin of peaches, and the syrup smells like a childhood Clark can't afford to remember. He wipes the radium glow of his watch with a thumb and tests the handset's cord like a nervous habit. Albany to Wilkin Red, confirm night fire plan. FPF along the forward hedge at Q431-179 on my mark. Defensive concentrations beyond the bend at Q432-180 and Q432-181. Interdiction boxes Able/Baker/Charlie on the D7 in 1-minute cycles, time on target. Add counter mortar TOT on sound range bearings. Stand by. The answer is as gentle as any bedtime. Albany, Wilkin Red, copy all. We have sound ranging and flash spotting sections up. We'll knit your minutes till daylight. Clickily 10 miles back, the FDC tent becomes a lighthouse. Lanterns hung low so the men can see the cream paper and pencil lines, a dozen watches synchronized against a single field clock. The fire direction officer marks a slim triangle where sound-ranging microphones have plotted a German tube, 2 bearings crossing neat as tailoring pins. Mortar at Q430182, he says. 155s will lead. Time of flight 38 seconds. 105s follow at 28. Meet at 0918 and 30. Splash -5. The corporal at the fuse setter turns teeth with a click-click that sounds like a sewing machine, murmuring MT 3.2, PD, MT 2.9, as if reading a recipe. Unteroffizier Bremer learns how the night has its own grammar. Smoke thins to damp and the orchard silhouette becomes a black lattice. He pushes his 7 men into the second hedge again, what is left of it, and counts and whispers. The boy with the blue eyes has found a piece of bread somewhere and chews as if the act itself repairs something. Far off, engines growl, a thin file of half-tracks or trucks moving without lamps, and Bremer lifts his head just enough to catch the rhythm. He tries to guess the distance by the way the sound flattens against wet leaves. Warten bis sie nah sind, he breathes. Wait until they are near. Time check, the radio in Clark's hand purls. At the tone, 0915. Tone. He taps his watch crystal, the orchard's gnats haloing the face like static. Albany copies, standby countermortar. Mark at 0918. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The guns accept his second is law. There is no warm-up, no ladder. The first long tom arrives like a judge's gavel on the farmyard beyond the poplars. The pigsty that replaced the morning's wreck remembers how to fall down. The 105s fill the punctuation. Sharp, busy, a scissor of airburst over the lane, and PD in the yard. The earth exhales plaster and straw. Rounds complete, Wilkenred says, and the voice could be announcing the arrival of a train, exactly when the timetable promised. Bremer feels the yard buck, as if some giant field horse tried to stand and changed its mind. He presses the MG-42's receiver with the base of his hand to quiet his nerves. Somewhere to his right, a man laughs once, the high, wrong kind, and then clamps his mouth shut. Track clatter behind him jogs nearer, stops, edges again. The sound of a driver tempting fate along a road that has become a theory. Bremer tells himself a comfortable lie. The Americans cannot keep the road closed all night. The lie lasts 4 breaths. Clark kneels in the orchard's black honeycomb, marking the forward hedge with a yellow panel he knows no one can see now, and does it anyway, because order has a taste men can swallow. Albany to Wilkenred, start boxes. Abel -40, Baker -25, Charlie -10. Meet each minute on the minute. Keep it 15 minutes unless I say lift. Albany Wilkenred, Abel, Baker, Charlie. Shot in 5. There is a secular holiness to the next quarter hour. At 55 seconds past the minute, a Kubelwagen noses up the D7 like a thought that won't be discouraged. At exactly 0, it meets a shell that had been promised to that square of air half a minute earlier. Farther down, a truck chooses between Baker and Charlie to be brave. It is taught a lesson in punctuality that makes courage academic. The boxes breathe in triplets: Abel, Baker, Charlie. The road learns a new word for no. Bremer watches the lesson paint itself along the hedge-bound lane and feels respect as rotten as envy. It isn't the wait. He has survived wait. It is the arrival. German barrages, even good ones, have taught him to read the pauses like punctuation and use them. Tonight, the sentence arrives all at once and all over. He touches the boy's shoulder. Nach jedem Kasten 2 kriechen, he says, after each box 2 crawl. He means to steal seconds out of the American calendar. The first pair slides belly down through nettles. Abel slams, dirt lifts, settles like a slow wave. They go again. Baker. One reaches the ditch, the other misjudges Charlie and learns the price of guessing the wrong minute. Counter-battery reports enemy Nebelwerfer in the next grid, the FDC tells Clark over the net, calm, untheatrical. Flash Spot places it near the Chestnut Copse. Albany copies, 1 Battalion TOT, PD first, then Airburst Treetop, H-40 from now. He can feel the watches stand to attention up and down the artillery park. A gun chief licks a thumb and flips a powder bag with a movement so practiced it has left his mind and taken up residence in his wrist. The Werfer tries to clear its throat. It coughs once and the sky above the copse becomes a lace of white flowers, each with an iron stamen. The launcher never gets to finish its sentence. For a time, the front shrinks to body size. Clark creeps the orchard line and speaks in a grammar of quick touches and small, exact words. Left a pace. Down. Hold. You can tell a line is good when ordinary words work. He pauses behind a stump that remembers being a tree and breathes the sugar stink of bruised apples. On his net, a platoon sergeant counts soft. 7, 8, 9, then clears his throat and says, almost conversational, Blue 1 has 9 effectives in the left squad. The way he says effectives is as loving as rough hands can be. Bremer inventories hope. 7 men. 2 bandages that haven't bled through yet. 1 Panzerschreck tube with a single round left. The propellant smelling sharp and Fox Den sour. 3 stick grenades. 4 magazines for the MG. Mud gritted, belts kinked where dirt wanted to be part of the war. He parcels the night into tasks. Watch 10 minutes, breathe 20, listen always, and feels better until the roadboxes thump again in their clean triplet and remind him who owns the minutes. Near midnight, the hedges sweat mist. You can hear animals now, cows complaining in a field, a dog alarmed by arithmetic. Clark huddles with the sapper sergeant over a dim pencil map. If they try to feel the hedge again, we burn the FPF and let them strike the seam one more time, he says. If they don't come, we keep the road closed and wait for daylight and armor. The sergeant grins without humor. We've been waiting for daylight and armor since we got off the boat, sir. Clark nods, then into the radio. Albany to Wilkin Red. Sustain boxes at half rate 2 more cycles, then check fire for 3. Back on at 0130. In the FDC, a captain draws a straight pencil arrow across the operations map, the tip grazing Marigny and then bending toward Coutances. A liaison from armor, eyes sandpapered by 24 hours awake, plants a finger at the bend. CCA of 2D Armored wants the seam at first light, he says. The captain taps his watch. We'll hand him a road that forgot how to be a road. Bremer sends the runner back again with the note he writes on the reverse of a medical slip. The handwriting is schoolmaster neat. Second hedge, platoon remnant, road interdicted, counterattack rumored, ammunition low. He does not write what he wants to. Time belongs to them. He folds the paper and presses it into the runner's hand as if it were a family photograph. The road boxes pause, exactly when Clark said they would. The quiet is so sudden, it feels like the field took a deep breath and forgot to exhale. Men adjust straps. A medic changes a dressing by touch and a curse. Bremer moves 2 of his 7 to a fold of ground that spills toward the farm track. A little cup he hopes can hold a minute or 2 if someone pours trouble into it. In the orchard, the rhino's engine coughs once and dies. Someone whispers for silence, as if silence were afraid and needed coaxing. Back on, Clark says softly at 0130, and Abel Baker Charlie take their places like clock hands. Down the D7, a motorcycle chooses a dare between boxes and is taught the old lesson about calendars and steel. After 2 o'clock, the night loosens. Men's heads dip and jerk. Watches glow faintly in cupped palms. Clark makes himself walk each foxhole because the walking is a wire strung through the line, the kind that keeps ideas from sagging. He does not realize he hums until a private, half asleep, smiles and hums the same tuneless bit back. On the net, Wilkin Red's voice checks in unasked. "Night's yours, Albany. We'll be here at first light." Clark replies, "Roger," and thinks, not for the first time, that this is what adult voices sounded like when he was a boy. Just before dawn, the field changes temperature, the way a room changes when a door opens in another part of the house. The mist thins from rope to veil. Ditches become lines again. The orchard smells like wet wood and the first curl of someone's coffee. Clark presses the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Sunrise in 15. Give me one last sweep on the D7. 2 cycles. Then stand ready for on-call TOT on road cut, hedge corners, and suspected fallback farm. Armor is hungry. Albany, Wilkin Red. Copy 2 cycles and ready on calls. Time check. At the tone, 0435. Tone. Bremer hears the dog bark once and is grateful for the clarity of sound that only morning delivers. He looks at the boy with the blue eyes and sees the face of someone who will be 40 one day if minutes can be stolen. Off beyond the hedges, engines idle, not German. They sound like men who can afford their fuel. He rubs mud over the shiny parts of the MG with slow, automatic care, the way a man might polish a shoe before an interview that will not hire him. "Vinnis Helviet," he says, when it gets light. Abel, Baker, Charlie step down like giants, deciding where to place their feet one last time. The D7 learns its lesson again at the exact minute required. The mist pulls itself apart and the hedges lose their shadows. Clark lifts his head and sees a corner of the world beyond the orchard. Flat, hedges scarce, fields sown in rectangles that invite movement. In the distance, to the right, a column of tanks, American, stubbier, with stowage-like junk shops on their flanks, follows a dirt track at a walking pace that looks like confidence. "Albany to Wilkin Red," he says, voice steady, almost light. "We'll push at first full light. Keep interdiction at half rate on the D7 until blue 6 marks go. Then, prepare broad front, TOT on the crossroads beyond. We'll call splash. Over." "Albany, Wilkin Red, we've got the time." Bremer, who cannot see the column yet, feels it the way a field feels a storm an hour out. He touches his watch, remembers it never worked last night, and slides it back into his cuff anyway because men prefer rituals to truth. He lines his 7 to catch an angle of fire into the first gap and tells the boy with the blue eyes to breathe slow. He waits. In the dark to light, waiting is a job that honest men can still do. First light peels the mist off the pasture in quiet curls, and the orchard turns from a black lattice to a place again. Trunks, ladders, a fallen crate of apples bruised to cinnamon. Clark presses the handset to his jaw and tastes damp canvas. "Albany to Wilkin Red, we are GO at first full light. Request broad front TOT on the crossroads at grid Q433182, plus the Y junction at Q434181. PD on the surfaces, then mechanical time for airburst over the ditch lines. 2 volleys each. We'll call splash." "Albany, Wilkin Red, copy 2 concentrates, Q433182 and Q434181. PD, then MT. Long toms will fire to arrive at 0447 and 30 seconds. Division 105s meet same. Splash -5. 10 miles behind, the Fire Direction Center breathes in chorus. The captain draws twin pencil spiders over the map, legs reaching from gun positions toward those 2 small squares on the earth. "Battery A time of flight 28, B27, C26, long toms 38. Set the splash 5 prior," he says, eyes flicking from board to watch like a man reading the surf. The corporal at the fuse setter turns teeth with a click, click, click. 3.2, then 2.9. Hands neat enough to frost a cake. Unteroffizier Bremer blinks grit out of his lashes and finds the same hedge, the same 7, a different world behind them. The boy with the blue eyes holds his canteen cap like a communion cup. Off right, beyond the second hedge, a slow train of engines idles, the kind of patient rumble that means armor has decided the day belongs to it. Bremer rubs mud over the MG42's bright bits. He tells himself if he can hold 1 more minute, maybe 2, the counterattack promised at dusk will arrive at dawn instead, and make sense of the ordering voice that has called for it all night. Time check. The radio in Clark's hand purls. At the tone, 0442. Tone. "Albany copies," Clark answers, automatic. He glances up. On the ridge beyond the orchard, a column of Shermans noses along a farm track. Whole stowage like junk shop shelves. Cullen rhino teeth still wet with roots. The lead tank commander's goggles are pushed to his forehead. He points with a flat hand, and the driver leans the 30 tons as if it were a bicycle. It is slow, it is ordinary, and it looks like victory because the hedges no longer argue back. "Blue 1, on me, left of the rhino," Clark says on the company net. "Blue 2, right bound to the stump line. Keep lanes clear. We'll punch as the guns land." He hears his own voice and notes its steadiness with surprise. Bremer hears it too, in another language. Movement, turning from flinches to plans. He presses his cheek to wood and sights into the gap they ripped yesterday, a new mouth in the bank where hawthorn still leaks white blossoms. On the far verge, 2 Americans flatten and then look up in that honest, quick way that only men who expect time to behave for them dare to look. Bremer waits for the rehearsal shots. Courtesy. Then, nothing. The morning inhales. "Shot over. Shot out. Splash over. Splash out." The crossroads at Q433182 becomes an argument settled without a preamble. A long tom's first punch lands on the near verge and folds a finger of road shoulder into the ditch. The 105s arrive in the same breath to unbutton the ditch itself, PD slapping grit to shin height. The second volley cuts the sentence in half with airbursts over the flanking hedges. Splinters scissor leaves into ribbons. At the Y junction beyond, a stray cyclist, some poor depot runner sent because paper said he had to go, coasts into the last inch of quiet and disappears as if a stagehand had yanked him off with a hooked cane. Albany, Wilkin Red, rounds complete, the voice says, cheerful in the way men are who keep promises they wrote down yesterday. Albany copies, Clark replies, already moving. Lift left, keep interdiction rearmost lane, we're pushing. The Rhino bites. The new gap drools soil as the tank shoulders, snorts, and then steps through like a bull deciding which fence to disapprove of. Clark tumbles into the wake with Blue 1. Boots slipping on churned chalk. A BAR starts its meat saw chew, steady, affectionate. Past the bank, the pasture opens in a shallow dish to the north, a rectangle stitched by wire and posts instead of earth-lipped hedges. It's Normandy's rarest thing. Room. Bremer sees the rhino's teeth and feels his stomach cool. You never get used to plants being murdered like that. He rips a 2-second burst low across the mouth of the new gap, disciplined, precise. An American flinches and is dragged by 2 more who don't wonder if they will die for him. They just accept the sentence and finish it. Bremer's belt snags. His assistant gunner slaps the feed and it straightens like a snake that has changed its mind about a knot. He draws breath, one more disciplined tear, then checks the ditch beyond the crossroads, a place he had planned to retreat through. It is not a place, it is a time, and the time is taken. Albany to Wilkin Red, shift to Q435182, cross line ahead of Blue 2's axis, 2 volleys, PD, follow with MT at treetop height along the telegraph poles, over. Wilkin Red copies, shot in 5, splash -5. Clark angles left. On his right, the 2nd platoon files through a slit in the bank, a line of crouched shoulders and helmet domes like a seam stitch. He keeps the handset live and hears, faintly, the calls from the gun line. Breach, bag, shell, ram, close. Like a catechism. The Rhino pauses on a route, lifts, drops. The orchard's last saplings nod as if the tank had excused itself politely. Bremer catches sight of breach light. On their side? No. Sun in an American scope. He shifts, tightens the MG's beaten zone across the shallow dish. Adds a touch of height to spray where a runner might sprint. He tastes his own breath. The boy with the blue eyes flinches at a shell thump far back, interdiction on the next lane, and looks at Bremer with a question toddlers ask. Are we going home? Bremer nods because that is what adults do. Splash over. Splash out. The telegraph line hisses white blossoms of shrapnel along the field margin. A lone Kubelwagen that had thought itself clever idling in a farm entrance learns the new etiquette. Its nose lifts, then chooses to be a heap instead. The PD rounds on the cross line ahead of Blue 2 slap dirt at ankle length so convincingly that a squad of grenadiers simply flattens and becomes part of the field. Go! Clark hears himself say, less a command than permission to obey what the world already wants. Blue 2 pours into the dish, rifles shouldered at that comfortable, working angle men find only after weeks of fear. On the ridge, the tank column forks. One element stays in shadow as reserve, the other slithers down a track to flank, hulls rocking, antennas smearing little lines of sun. A German mortar behind the second hedge tries to contribute history. A single round arcs and drops with a hollow blart near the orchard stump line. 2 men duck on instinct. One mutters a farm word for manure, fondly, the way men spit when a horse misbehaves. Clark keys the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Counter mortar possible in the hedgerow south of the Y. Request battery TOT, PD, then MT. Albany, Wilkin Red. H-40, splash -5. Bremer watches the mortar crew he does not command. Neighbors, cousins, kneel in neat prayer poses behind a pigyard wall they rebuilt last night because rebuilt walls feel like control. The first TOT arrives like a schoolmaster's ruler across the knuckles. The wall slumps into the yard, and the second volley tinsels the air overhead so completely that the world looks like it's shedding metal fur. When he blinks, the crew is a yard of confusion and a shovel handle. The Rhino clears the far lip of the dish. Its driver snicks left to mask the platoon's bound. Clark drops to a knee where the grass is slick with dew and apples and something redder. Blue 1, anchor on the pump trough. Blue 2, edge the wire and hold. We'll hook the junction. He raises the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red, effects good. Lift to Q436-183, road cut beyond the pump trough. 1 volley PD, 1 air. Then check fire, danger close. Albany, Wilkin Red, roger. Shot, over. Shot, out. Splash, over. Splash, out. The road cut gives up its edges, dirt slumping in apology. Fragments pluck at the pump's handle, make it ring like a cheap bell. Clark waits the length of a thought and then waves. Men move. A BAR plants at the trough and owns 30 yards of day. A private with a Thompson lopes like a farm dog. The Rhino hunkers, a dark hill with a beating heart. Bremer sees the hook forming, pressure on the hedge here, feint on the lane there, the real intent sliding past to widen the seam, and understands that the Americans are no longer fighting the hedge. They are fighting the map. He looks at his watch out of habit and finds it still dead. He laughs, once, a single bark. The boy flinches and grins back, confused. Alles gut, Bremer lies. Behind Clark, the company net crackles with a new human, a battalion runner panting into a handset somewhere. Blue 6, this is Able 6. Regiment reports armor pushing through the seam north of Marigny. Keep your corridor painted. You'll have CCA vehicles in your lanes in 20. Clark glances at the map, at the watch, at the lanes he can now point to and trust. Albany copies, he says, and to Wilkin Red, hold interdiction boxes at half rate on the D7. Prepare broad front TOT 1 road junction deeper at Q437184 on my mark. Ready, Wilkin Red says, simple as placing a hand on a shoulder. Bremer inches the MG a palm's width to rake the new mouth the Rhino has made in the next bank. The first burst is perfect, low, disciplined, hopeful, and cuts an American across the thigh. The man goes down with a groan that sounds like a broken fence. 2 others haul him by straps in a practiced prayer. For an instant, Bremer is 20 and winning a machine gun prize on a summer range. Then the hedge above the gun shakes with an airburst and polite leaves drift down onto his helmet like confetti at the wrong wedding. Mark, Clark says softly. The next TOT lands a field farther on. Road, ditch, hedge corner all at once, no rehearsal. Beyond it, a thin line of gray moves left to right. Germans, or the idea of Germans. They vanish as if walking behind curtains that a stagehand forgot to open. On the ridge, a platoon of Shermans clatters out of shade and takes the farm track with their bows turned slightly outward. The gesture a man makes when he spreads his arms and says, "Here, this is mine now." Clark feels the field change temperature again, the way rooms do when a window opens. He keys the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Check fire on forward grids. Keep road boxes. We're through this hedge and into the next. We'll mark yellow on the pump trough. Albany, Wilkin Red. Rounds complete. We'll keep their answers late. Bremer kisses the MG's stock once with his cheekbone and then lets it go. He pulls the boy with the blue eyes back by the collar into a seam of earth where the bank still remembers how to be a wall. The counterattack that was supposed to tidy this morning up is somewhere beyond sound, getting its minutes wrong. He feels the new humiliation and accepts it the way men accept weather. Not beaten, late. Clark steps over the pump trough and sets his boot on the other side of the day. He does not cheer. He looks at his watch as if it were a friend's face. He says into the radio, not loud, not dramatic, Blue 6 is across. The orchard, the hedges, the lanes, those green dictionaries of murder are behind him for a few fields at least. Ahead, rectangles, telegraph poles, a road that remembers how to be flat. Albany, Wilkin Red says in his ear, warm as coffee. We've got your seconds when you need them. The hedges finally admit a sky. Not a slit of gray between banks, not a keyhole of blue behind hawthorn, but a sheet you could lay a ruler on. The pasture beyond the pump trough is a flat of damp grass fenced by wire and posts, and the road that flanks it runs arrow straight toward Marigny like a decision. Clark rises from the trough and feels the odd lightness that comes when the walls of a room disappear. He thumbs the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. We're in the open. Request interdiction 1 junction deeper, Q437184, and a curtain along the lateral lane at Q438183. PD first, then MT treetop. 2 volleys each. We'll push on your splash. Albany, Wilkin Red. Copy curtain and junction. Long Tom's lead. Splash, -5. 10 miles back, the FDC's lanterns are going dim pale as the tent becomes a place for shadows rather than light. The captain doesn't notice. He moves his pencil like a man turning a crank. Battery ATF-28, B-27, C-26, Long Tom's 3-8, meet at 49 and 15, give the curtain MT 3.2. The corporal at the fuse setter sings the teeth around again, click, click, while a chief of section wipes a hand down his undershirt and calls elevation in a voice that would sound the same at a picnic. Unteroffizier Bremer watches the Americans step into rectangles as if they had invented the concept. For a month, his world had been vertical walls you could lean against. Now it is a tabletop that refuses his hands. He pulls the MG back a half meter to angle across the wire-fenced field and tries to pretend the posts are as good as banks. His 7 reduce themselves to useful facts. 1 Panzerschreck round, 3 stick grenades, belts kinked and then made obedient by dirty fingers. The boy with the blue eyes grips the canteen cap so hard his knuckles polish. Noch einmal? One more time? Bremer nods. The courage is in the nod, not the answer. Shot over. Shot out. Splash over. Splash out. The curtain lands exactly where Clark asked the weather to change. The lateral lane coughs, leaves, and splinters. White MT flowers open above the ditch and shake steel down like sleet. At the farther junction, a truck that thought it had beaten time turns sideways and remembers humility. The second volley punctuates the first so neatly that men who had meant to sprint between sentences find there's no paper. Albany, Wilkin Red, rounds complete. Copy, Clark says, already pointing. Blue 2, wire right. Blue 1, cut left and hold that pump track. Rhino, nose through and watch the ditch. The tank answers like a farm animal. Snort, wait, a chew of the ground. Cullen teeth bite posts, tear wire into polite coils, and the driver edges the 30 tons across the ditch with the same care a man uses to put a sleeping child into bed. Clark sees beyond, the straight road, the hour, a slat of sun, and names none of it. He moves. Bremer drags the sights a finger width and writes a low ribbon through the gap. A private in an American jacket folds and is hauled by 2 friends with the efficiency of practiced grief. Bremer feels the answer back almost before the thought. The hedge above his muzzle shakes with a pop of MT and a froth of leaves bobs down. He lowers the gun and cuts again, measuring with the only ruler he owns now. 2 seconds. Breathe. 2 seconds. The belt snags. The assistant gunner slaps. Order returns like a favor, not owed. Albany to Wilkin Red. Check fire forward. Danger close. Keep the curtain. Stand by for broad front TOT at Q439-185 when I mark. Standing by, Albany. The company net has changed voice since dawn. Steadier, almost conversational. Blue 2 on the wire, a sergeant says like a man counting fence posts. BAR centerline. Left clear. Hold your lane. The words have turned from prayers to chores. Clark feels some elastic band inside him relax a notch and snakes across the ditch after the Rhino. The field smells of wet grass and motor oil and the metallic sweetness that men stop noticing if they want to keep walking. Marigny lies a mile off in smoke and rumor. Beyond it, someone's map has a blue pencil arrow that bends toward Coutances and then south to Avranches, to bridges that promise France can be cut in half. Clark doesn't need the map. He has the watch. He presses the handset. Albany, mark for junction strike. Mark. Albany, Wilkin Red, shot over, shot out, splash over, splash out. The junction buckles again without preface. A Kubelwagen leaps and lies still. On the horizon a glint of gray, the sort that once meant Panzer in a hedgerow, now looks like a photograph of yesterday. Clark feels the impatience of engines, somewhere off to the right, where a column of Shermans has found a farm lane and is making it an argument they intend to win with bulk and momentum. He speaks without thinking, the way a man breathes. Blue 6 to all blues, keep the corridor painted. Armor wants your lanes. Bremer hears the armor before he sees it. A steady, confident hum like a generator starting up in a town that just got electricity. Not the angry clatter of a half-track rushed into a fight. Not the elegant idle of a panther showing off on a parade square. A workman's drone. He sights left to catch a diagonal that will rake whatever pours from the new gap. He picks his spot on the wire where Americans will be because the wire says so, not the hedge. Cours, he tells the boy. Short. Measured. Make the belt mean something. The first Shermans of the reserve platoon in Clark's sector drop off the ridge, hulls rocking, antennas drawing wavy pencil lines through the air. The lead tank pauses long enough to let its bow machine gun reach into a stand of alder and rearrange two Germans' morning plan. A hand on the turret points, flat and decisive. The driver leans the hull like a skater and heaves over a culvert. Behind them, more tanks, CCA someone said on the net, stack politely by the orchard, engines idling, each waiting its turn to own a piece of road. Clark keys the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Lift curtain on my mark. Mark. Shift interdiction one more box along D7. We'll pass armor. Copy, Albany. We'll keep their answers late. On the gun line, men are in shirts and dog tags and powder soot. The number 1 on a 105 swats the breech shut and says, on the way, without heat. The battery commander rolls his shoulder and checks the watch he's been checking since dawn. He can feel, through the soles of his boots, the moment his barrages become punctuation for someone else's paragraph. He smiles without knowing he's done it. Bremer's runner returns where nobody told him not to. Young, knees muddy, eyes coin bright. Herr Unteroffizier, the counterattack is... moving? From the left? Maybe from nowhere. Orders say hold. The boy says the last word like it might do magic. Bremer nods because nodding is the only spell left. He scans the left. You can't flank in a field that is all flank. He sets the MG to comb the angle toward the next wire. He swallows. His mouth tastes like old pennies and rain. The company net coughs a new voice. Regiment. Clipped. Blue 6, maintain your east lanes. Armor in the corridor in 2-0. Clark answers. Wilkin Red is sewing. Lanes will hold. He looks up. You could put a carpenter's level on the day. He thinks of Newark watchmakers who will never see this field and still made it happen. The last hedgerow in front of them is a suggestion. Not a bank with roots and a history, but an overgrown fence that could be persuaded. The rhino noses it. The posts object, then change their minds. Clark jogs in with Blue 1 on the tank's left shoulder and breathes apples and exhaust and the faint talc of ground dust freed from a month's rain. Beyond, telegraph poles, not hedges. A geometry men can live inside without dying for every yard. Bremer makes his last neat burst count, a seam at knee height that catches a rushing figure on the thigh. The figure goes down. Two Americans hook him under the armpits and tow him behind the rhino, as if the tank were a large animal that could protect a man as tenderly as a barn wall. Bremer feels the sight picture blur, as if the rifle were shivering. He blinks until the world stands still again, just long enough to see the MT blossoms curl over the next lane and think, not heavy, punctual. Albany to Wilkin Red, check fire forward, keep boxes half rate. We're handing lanes to armor now. Yellow panel on the crossroads. Albany, Wilkin Red, rounds complete. We'll keep the road late and the answers later. The first tanks in Clark's corridor chew into the straight. Their bows are turned a hair outward, a gesture that says to the hedges, stay gone. A tanker waves to the infantry with 3 fingers and a cigarette, and the absolute calm of a man who has discovered that today obeys clocks. Clark slaps the rhino's flank twice, superstition and thanks, and steps aside so another platoon can flow through. The radio warms his palm. He says, almost to himself, Blue 6 hands lanes. The net answers with simple acknowledgments that sound like signatures. Bremer sets the dead watch in his cuff by habit and tells the boy, Wenn es dunkel wird, zählen wir. When it gets dark, we will count. He means men, belts, lies they can tell themselves. The boy nods like a parishioner. Off beyond the open, the road boxes speak again. Abel, Baker, Charlie. A catechism the Americans have taught the countryside. A truck tests the space between Baker and Charlie and learns what time thinks of hope. Clark watches a column of Shermans become a sentence, moving away from him. The hedges behind have stopped being a vocabulary. Ahead, there are verbs. Cross, turn, cut. He keys the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red. Thank you, we're through the door. Albany, the voice comes back, warmth and pencil and coffee. We've got your seconds wherever the road runs. The column's hum stretches down the straight like a wire, and the hedges, those green jailers, stand back with their hands in their pockets. Clark moves at a trot along the rhino's left shoulder, hand set warm against his jaw, boots finding the rhythm of a road that finally remembers being a road. Albany to Wilkin red, he says, eyes forward on the telegraph poles that tick off distance like a metronome. Push interdiction 2 junctions deeper, Q439-185 and Q440-186. PD on surfaces, MT treetop over ditches. 2 volleys each. We are passing armor in lane. Albany, Wilkin red, copy deeper interdiction. Long Tom's lead, splash -5. 10 miles back, the tent is daylight soft now, lanterns turned low. The FDC captain traces spidery legs to those 2 new grids, adjusting for the warming morning, the sort of correction that lives in wrist bones as much as in math. Battery ATF-28, B-27, C-26. Long Tom's 3-8. Meet at 53 and 15, splash -5, he says, eyes flicking between watch and plotting board. The fuse setter's click-click is a sewing machine stitching a road shut. Unteroffizier Bremer drags his 7 along the hedge's inside lip, a low, ragged line that would make a drill master weep. The boy with the blue eyes keeps one hand on Bremer's belt as if the older man were a rope. The MG-42 feels heavier by memory. Bremer steals seconds where he can. 2 men crawl while 2 cover, 2 prepare, and turns the road's new catechism into his own prayer. Abel, Baker, Charlie. Go between them. Do not guess wrong. A truck grinds behind them, then thinks better of the D7 and noses into a farm track. The track coughs airbursts and persuades the truck to reconsider existence entirely. Shot, over. Shot, out. Splash, over. Splash, out. The nearer junction buckles cleanly. The far one learns manners. A cyclist who tries to slither along a hedge's seam finds that time has chosen to live exactly where his front wheel needs to be. Clark feels the beat through his boots more than hears it, a pressure syllable that replaces weeks of hedge whispers. Albany, Wilkin, red. Rounds complete. Copy, he says, already waving Blue 2 to peel right along the fence line. Rhino, nose the culvert. BAR center line. The tank edges its weight over the culvert, a polite elephant. The culvert answers with a sigh and holds. Clark steps across into a field that has the good manners to be a rectangle. He catches movement to the right, GIs with shovels, engineers teasing wire like cats at yarn, a medic laying a man's leg straight with the gentleness you save for your own family. He does not stop. It is a busy morning. There is no punctuation to spare. Bremer sets the gun in a shallow rake to cover the new mouth the rhino has chewed. He takes a 2-second bite low and measured, the way summer ranges taught him, and sees an American pitch forward and 2 others haul him by the straps. The belt snags, the assistant gunner slaps and pulls. The gun smooths. The hedge above his muzzle shakes with an MT pop and flutters leaves the color of yesterday. He lowers the sights and takes another neat seam. Discipline tastes like iron and pennies. Albany to Wilkin red. Check fire forward. Danger close. Maintain curtain on lateral at Q438-183. Prepare broad front TOT on the roundabout at Q441-187. Will mark. Standing by, Albany. On Clark's net, the voices are all business now. Blue 1 on the fence. Left is clear. Wire cut. BAR up. The sound has changed from men borrowing courage to men spending it. He thumbs the handset. Mark. Now. Albany, Wilkin red. Shot. Over. Shot. Out. Splash. Over. Splash. Out. The roundabout in the village edge doesn't explode so much as lose the argument. PD scours the cobbles. MT snips hedges and gutter lines. A gray car. Staff. The driver wearing neat gloves. Glides into the square a heartbeat early and learns how punctuality feels from the wrong side. The second volley tidies what the first insisted on. Far left, armor in the neighboring regiment's corridor drops off the ridge like a string of refrigerator-sized beetles, holes rocking. You can tell confidence by speed that refuses to hurry. The lead tank pauses, lets a bowgun chew a smear out of an alder stand, and slithers on. Clark breathes once, twice, counting not for calm, but for watches. Albany to Wilkin red. Shift interdiction one more box along D7. We're through the fence here. Copy. We'll keep their answers late. Bremer's runner skids in with knees and elbows muddy. Voice ragged. Herr Unteroffizier, Marigny. They say it's not hours, in an hour perhaps. Orders say, hold. Counterattack, later. The boy says, later. Like a coin he hopes will buy bread. Bremer nods because nodding is a currency that works everywhere. He angles the MG to rake the lane the Americans will use, then stops. There is no lane. There is only distance. And the enemy owns the minutes between. He swallows it, like bad coffee. They cross a last vestigial hedge, the kind a farmer lets go when wood is cheap and time is kinder. And the road opens like a drawer you'd been told was locked. Telegraph poles stride. The sky stops peering and stands straight. Clark lifts his head, not in pride, but to aim better. Blue 2, hook left on the pump trough lane. Blue 1, straight into the houses by the Y. Rhino, mask Blue 1's bound. The Rhino swings its nose, as obedient as a tractor. The air smells like sawdust and frying fat, and the metallic sweetness that lives on mornings like this. From the rear, further than sense, but close enough to move men, comes a new thunder. Bigger, wider, a rolling series of crumps that the infantry recognize now as somebody else's corridor being sewn shut. The net coughs a regiment voice. Marigny in hand within the hour. Keep lanes clear for CCA through your grid. Coutance in the talk. Out. The way the voice says coutance is the way carpenters say beam. Bremer hears his own world reported in a voice not meant for him, in English, through cracks. Marigny, soon, and feels the shape of his duty, ugly and simple. Buy time with small money. Bursts, pauses, two men crawling between Abel and Baker. He runs a finger along the MG's receiver as if it were a dog's spine. Curse, he tells the boy again, gentle as he can make it, short. Albany to Wilkin Red, we're at the village lip. Request smoke. 2 guns on the Y junction Q434-181, then lift for push. Interdiction beyond, half rate. Albany, Wilkin Red, smoke in 5. Interdiction continues. 2 white chrysanthemums open and drift the Y into a cousin of mercy. Clark waves, and Blue 1 slides under the smoke's hem like men ducking a laundry line. A bar plant at a doorway and adopts the street. An M1 cracks, 1, 2, like a hammer striking anvil. The Rhino noses a doorway's lintel, thinking about angles the way cows think about fences. On the far side of the square, a German field kitchen sits tilt-axled, its chimney faint with yesterday's soup. A man in an apron stares around the smoke with a ladle in his hand and the expression of a man who expected to cook and found he was in a war again. He drops the ladle and it makes a small, domestic, indecent sound on cobble. Bremer sees him and feels a laugh that isn't funny try to climb his throat. The first Sherman in Clark's lane slumps over a gutter and points its bow machine gun at the street's question marks. Its commander raises 2 fingers to his goggles, then down to the infantry with a small flat wave that says, quite all right. Clark slaps the tank's flank out of habit and gratitude and steps past the fender into the square. He looks left, a doorway, a staircase, a clock in a shop window with its hand stopped at some other unit's fight. Albany to Wilkin Red, junction secured, lift forward fires, keep boxes out on the D7, half rate. Prepare 1 full battalion TOT on the far crossroads at Q443-188 on my mark. Ready, Albany. Bremer pulls his 7 into the lee of a half-collapsed wall and divides them with the calm of a schoolteacher assigning sums. Zwei rechts, zwei links, eine mittig, wechseln Decken. 2 right, 2 left, 1 middle, alternate covering fire. It sounds like a plan. Plans taste like bread. He sets the MG to rake the square and holds his breath for the rehearsal shot that will tell him where the Americans are looking. Nothing. Just the sudden, clean sentence when the next junction learns the word no. Mark, Clark murmurs. The far crossroads bounces, settles, learns. A rattled Opal wishes it had chosen to be late yesterday instead. A 105 slaps a low wall into a shape that throws poor cover across the street. The second volley opens white blossoms over a ditch line, and a half-dozen helmets drop out of sight like coins. Albany, Wilkin Red, rounds complete. Copy, we're through. Clark lowers the handset and finally lets his lungs take a deeper bite of the day. The square feels like a room that someone cleaned in a hurry. He hears a dog bark behind a shutter, 2 beats, then silence, as if the dog has learned the timetable too. He steps past a doorway where a woman's hand has left flour on the jam and says, without deciding to, Blue 6 is at the square. On the ridge behind him, a line of Shermans turns its bows toward the next road and goes about the work of summer, threshing, but with steel. Bremer watches the tanks choose past him instead of toward him, today's new humiliation, and sets his cheek against the stock for one last neat seam. Short, he writes it. An American flinches and is hauled, patient, competent. Bremer lowers the gun, tastes the penny tang again, and finally admits the word that has been pressing his teeth all day. Not doomed. Late. Clark glances at his watch. The second hand is a polite, busy thing. He keys the handset. Albany to Wilkin Red, thank you for the weather. Anytime you've got the time, the voice says, smiling in coffee. The square breathes like a room between guests. A dog behind a shutter tries a bark and thinks better of it. Clark steps off the cobbles and back into the straight, the rhino hulking on his right like a patient ox. The telegraph pulls pace south in even strides. He touches the handset to his jaw the way a man checks his pulse. Albany to Wilkin Red, we hold the Y. Request interdiction 2 more grids along the D7, Q443188, and Q444189. PD on the hard, MT treetop over the verges. 2 volleys each. Armor will pass in our lane. Albany, Wilkin Red. Copy interdiction. Long toms will lead. Splash -5. 10 miles behind, canvas walls snap a sleepy applause. The FDC captain traces 2 legs across the acetate like a spider that knows exactly where it's going. Battery ATF-28, B-27, C-26. Long toms 3-8. Meet at 58 and 15. Splash -5, he says, and his watch hand keeps moving like confidence you can wear. Unteroffizier Bremer pulls his 7 along the back of a garden wall that remembers peacetime tomatoes. The boy with the blue eyes keeps a hand crooked in Bremer's belt. They have 1 full belt for the MG42 and a short that kinked and then yielded to dirty fingers. A Panzerschreck tube rides on a grenadier's shoulder like a sin he can't confess. The road beyond the hedge whispers the new catechism. Abel, Baker, Charlie, at a polite half rate now, as if the artillery were letting the countryside sleep in between scoldings. Shot, over. Shot, out. Splash, over. Splash, out. What passes for a crossroads 2 grids down gives up and lies flatter. A 105 slaps grit to ankle height along the verges. An MT blossom combs leaves and gutters. The second volley arrives so close on the heels of the first that a driver who had timed bravery between sentences finds there is no sentence break at all. Clark tastes the pressure syllable through his boots. Rounds complete, Wilkin Red says, mild as coffee. Clark breathes once, twice, and lets the armor go. The Shermans in his lane don't hurry, they work. Bowguns chew hedges into ribs. Drivers ease 30 tons over culverts like men putting children to bed. A tank commander lifts 2 fingers from a turret rim and the platoon's bows settle just right. Cheeks turn slightly outward, a gesture that says to the day, behave. A second column hums past the far hedges, gray silhouettes behind smoke, some other regiment's corridor being sown, another parish of the morning learning punctuality. Bremer hears the armor the way a field hears a storm an hour out. He angles the MG to rake a wire fence that will decide where Americans must pass and feels a brief, unkind relief. A predictable geometry he can hurt. Short burst, 2 seconds, breathe. The belt stutters. The assistant gunner slaps and the steel ribbon runs true again. 2 shapes flinch and vanish. The hedge above the muzzle coughs white as a mechanical time shell shakes it like a dog shakes a rabbit. Leaves fall onto his helmet. He rests his cheek a heartbeat on the stock the way a tired man rests his head on a door jamb. Albany to Wilkin Red, Clark says. Check fire forward, danger close. Maintain D7 boxes at half rate. On call, TOT for far T junction, Q445190. I'll mark. Wilkin Red copies, standing by. You can feel when a battle stops being about rooms and becomes about roads. The company net changes key. Less prayer, more errands. Blue 2, wire right. Left is good. Rhino, hold. Medic, doorway. Clark steps with Blue 1 along a fence line, the handset knocking his chest like a second heart. Past the fence, a low pasture poor. No banks, just posts and a ditch line that doesn't care who crosses it as long as you accept getting your boots wet. He glances up the straight. Telegraph poles tick distance like a metronome that believes in itself. On the gun line, the number 1 on a 105 closes a breach with a palm slap and says on the way at the exact temperature of a man calling next batter. Powder soot has found the permanent lines in his skin. A chief of section shakes his wrist loose and looks at his watch, and thinks of his kitchen clock, and then remembers he is here, and it is now, and the seconds belong to him if he minds them. Bremer's runner brings a scrap of paper that was once a medical slip. The handwriting is tidy, the way schoolmasters write on Mondays. Hold second hedge if possible. Counterattack postponed. Withdraw by order if flanks uncovered. The word postponed tastes like bad milk. Bremer nods to pay the boy for carrying it. He tucks the paper under a strap where a saint might live. A pair of civilians, woman with a flower-white hand on a doorjamb, man in a black cap holding a dog by its scruff, peer through smoke at a street that used to be a street yesterday. The woman's mouth makes a small O. Clark pretends not to see them because that is how you keep your eyes where they pay interest. He keys. Mark, he says, voice low. Farther down, the T-junction shrugs under a long tom and then learns manners under the 105s. A staff car sleeks in from the left with the neat audacity of peacetime. It folds like laundry. Routes complete, Wilkin Red says. You're good to go. Blue 6 to all blues, Clark answers on the company net, and the words sound like a carpenter's. Hold your lanes. Armor through. The reserve platoon of Shermans in his sector purrs by. A tanker flicks ash and tips 2 fingers helmetward. Clark slaps the Rhino's skirt. Thanks, superstition. And steps off the road so 30 tons of punctuality can go exactly where they want to. Past the last wrecked hedge, fields open into rectangles a regiment could breathe in. Men stop ducking for the sake of it. Rifles carry at that lazy angle you earn with hours. Bremer waits through Abel, sends 2 crawlers between Abel and Baker. Waits again, sends 2 more. The second pair meets the thin, unkind edge between Baker and Charlie and doesn't come back. He holds the MG's ears for another 2-second seam at knee height and sees an American take it in the leg and be hauled like a sack, tender and transactional, behind a tank. The word he has been refusing finally sits down in him. Not defeat. Late. He feels the shame and the clarity, and neither burns as badly as you'd think. Albany to Wilkin Red. Shift interdiction 1 more grid. Hold the curtain on the lateral. Copy, Albany. Curtain holds. Boxes step. The voice is sunlight on paper. In the village edge, a sign that says Marigny leans at a comic angle. A clock in a shop window still reads some other hour when somebody else owned the square. A field kitchen's chimney breathes a ghost of soup. A bar burps from a doorway and stops, satisfied. The Rhino noses a collapsed lintel and chooses not to be theatrical. It waits while a corporal kicks bricks out of the way with a boot and a farm curse. On the ridge to the right, somebody else's division becomes a visible rumor. Columns of armor flowing south like a river that forgot there were rocks. You can tell a plan is working when radios sound bored. Regimental net. Coutals in discussion. Avroche in the talk. The way the voice says Avroche is the way Masons say arch. Bremer touches his dead watch by habit. Its hands still point to a part of yesterday where seconds did not matter. He slides it back in his cuff because rituals keep men anchored when the floor moves. He looks at the 7, 6 if he is honest, and says, "Zur Hook auf mein Zeichen." Back on my signal. He gives them the only honest gift left, a moment to breathe on purpose. Albany to Wilkin Red, last ask before handoff. Broad front TOT on the ridge track at Q446-191. 2 volleys. Then you stay on the boxes and we'll ride the tanks. We've got it, Wilkin Red answers. Shot in 5. Splash -5. The ridge track accepts judgment without theatrics. PD cracks along the verge. MT shakes poplar crowns. A horse throws its head and bolts, all bone and panic, and then is calmed by a farmer's hand you can't see. The second volley tidies. "Rounds complete," the voice says. And somewhere 10 miles back, a captain puts a pencil down and rolls his shoulder and lets himself think, just for a second, of a kitchen clock. Clark turns to the Rhino driver and jerks his thumb. "Hold! Let him go!" The driver grins, grease in the lines of his face, and leans his back against steel. 3 Shermans shoulder past, bows turn slightly outward as if brushing curtains. A tanker taps the turret twice. "Habit, thanks." And then they are gone down the straight. Their engine's a grammar you can build a day on. The square is now a room with furniture again. A medic ties off a bandage and says a farm word for there that belongs to Ohio. A sapper leans on a shovel and grins at the ditch he is taught to behave. A private discovers a cigarette behind his ear and offers it dumbly to a buddy who doesn't smoke. Clark pinches the handset and says, not for effect, "Blue 6 hands lanes." The regiment answers with approvals the size of commas. On the cornet far away, some staff voice says "Avranche" twice in a row and then laughs like a man who hasn't yet slept and just now noticed. Bremer leads his 6 into a folded pasture behind the garden wall, a cup of land the new artillery grammar might miss. He kneels and faces them because men deserve a face when you ask them to live. "Wir gehen, wenn ich sage," he says. "We go when I say." He listens to the road boxes breathe. Abel, Baker, Charlie. He waits until his mouth can taste the space between them and then says, "Jetzt," and they go on their bellies like patient boats through grass. The field does not kill them for once. He feels that like a toy stolen back. On the gun line, the battery commander checks his watch and drinks coffee that tastes like newsprint. His number 1 wipes the breech with a clean rag because that is how you tell steel you respect it. A corporal at the fuse setter spins teeth around one last time because hands hate to be idle when clocks are working. Clark steps to the edge of the road and looks south. The telegraph poles keep their promise. The hedges lie like furniture that someone has pushed up against walls. He hears boots behind him, the company resettling its straps, the Rhino's engine breathing low. He glances at his watch. The second hand is busy in a way that no longer feels indecent. He keys the handset. "Albany to Wilkin red. We're good. Keep the road late. We'll take the miles." "Albany," the voice comes back, warm and ordinary. "We've got your seconds wherever you put them." Clark tucks the handset against his chest and, just for half a breath, allows himself to imagine the pencil line the Corps captain is drawing toward places the day will learn to pronounce. Then, he nods to the platoon leader, points to the next telegraph pole, and they go. Not because someone said hero, but because the watch said now.